Hello, class. This is the third lesson on content, and we're going to talk about books as cultural exchanges. So some essential questions that we're going to look at is what is cultural exchange? What is the role of books in cultural exchange, and the positive negative effects of books as cultural exchange, and the role of censorship. And over here you see books that are cultural type exchange books where they are talking about specific things that have to do in a culture. Some of these are novels, some of them are not novels. You've probably, I know in school at some point they have you read Things Fall Apart, and I'm not sure about the rest of them. I had to go through Anna Karenina up here, Anna Karenina, and that is a really long book. Okay, so what is cultural exchange? It's sharing ideas, traditions, information, and beliefs between different cultures in order to build understanding. And this is important because as the world gets smaller because we have internet and we deal with more and more people from different places, the more we can kind of understand the circumstances, the better things get. This is also why things like exchange student programs are so important. However, unintentional cultural exchange lacks the content and the context information needed for understanding. You just see something, it's cool, it's appropriated, but there's no backstory for it. So here's an example of cultural exchange from my family. This is my cousin Tamara. There she is. There she is. We're almost exactly the same age. And back when she was in college, she was an exchange student to India. And she met her husband, Suraj, who is here. And they got married. And they lived in Russia for a long time, and they had 2 sons. Here they are. And they are now living in Vermont. Tamara herself is French-Canadian. She was born in Canada, in the area where they speak French. Her father is French-Canadian. Her mother is Scotch-Irish, like my mother. And their family combines that heritage, but also all of the places and things that they have to bring to it. So there's French-Canadian and American and Indian and Russian practices. And this is their general holiday kind of greeting, and you can see that it's in multiple languages. So books as cultural exchange works in a few different ways. You have primary sources, like you study in history class, that document cultural ideas and experiences in their own language as best. And then secondary sources that are translations of those primary sources. They translate them from the original language into the reader's language. And then secondary sources that record cultural behaviors and information as viewed by somebody outside the culture. So it's somebody that isn't part of the culture going there and observing and recording what they see. And then there's edited sources that just take parts of the information. They don't really have the full content and context, and they just kind of smash things together. And remember, this works for both fiction and nonfiction. So my example of a really good example of cultural exchange in books is the comic Love and Rockets, which is, I think, still being written. It's one of my favorites ever. It's written by the brothers Hernandez. And there's 2 storylines in each issue. One storyline focuses on a small town in Mexico, and one storyline focuses on a barrio, a neighborhood in East Los Angeles. The brothers are from the cultures. They would go back and forth between their family's hometown, which was a small, very rural village in Mexico, and where they lived in the United States, which was inner city East LA. So when they're writing their stories, they're pulling from things that they know And by reading them, even in the English translation, you really get some insight on some of the things that traditions, foods, but also some of the things that they have to work around. So as a positive exchange, primary sources document cultural ideas and experiences in their own language. So these are authentic cultural experiences. It's accurate. It provides a cultural perspective on what's happening and context information. And my example of this is this antique medical book from the Ottoman Empire, which think Turkey in the Middle East. This has direct information, and you can see that it's written in Arabic, and it's about what they viewed as the cause of toothaches and how they treated them. So if you look closely at the teeth, you see there's little evil people living in your teeth that make them hurt. And while that's not necessarily true, though it can feel like that, over here on the right, you can see their process for treating it, which is by pulling the tooth out. Notice that they are sterilizing the dental instruments. This little guy has bellows and fire, and he's heating those up so they can be used in your mouth without any germs. Yeah. The Western world, Europe and the Americas, Anglo-America, didn't get around to understanding sterilization until the 1800s. So mostly positive exchange can be secondary sources that translate from the original language. Their core is a primary source, but how good they are, it depends upon the skill of the translator, and depends upon how well the language translates to the other language, because some languages have words and ideas that aren't found in another language, and so they have to substitute something that they think is similar, which is not always similar. So an example of a poor translation is a Chinese sign over on your right that it's from China, and below it is their English translation, just like you see on our signs where you have, whatever the sign says and then different languages underneath. And so it says, please keep quiet and take care of your children. No romping and potato. Thank you. Not quite sure what that means. So when we start sliding towards negative is when cultural behaviors and information is recorded by somebody outside of the culture. They went there, they visited or lived there for a while and observed and wrote down what they think. So this can create stereotypes and also rely on stereotypes, because if you grow up thinking that, for example, everybody in the Middle East dresses like a belly dancer, that might be what you're looking for, even though it's not true. And you kind of twist reality to make it true. They can be missing content and context. You think you understand, but you don't really understand because they don't tell you everything necessarily. Misunderstandings presented as truth. That's where our word flashback to Crafts 1 tattoo comes from. Because when the British asked the natives what that was, meaning what is that drawing on your face, the natives thought they were talking about the noise the tattoo made. And so they said tattoo. And that's actually the sound of the chisel and the hammer that they used to put the tattoo into the skin. And the name of the tattoo itself is Tomoko. Easy misunderstanding. However, in our culture, the word tattoo is what we've held on to. We've held on to the wrong word. And then the validity of the eyewitness. Are they really paying attention to what they see, or is it just kind of half remembered later? So we have our example over here is the Arabian Nights, and how that, the stories that were translated into the English language and which were very popular. and the Orientalism paintings of the 1800s were very popular. And they created this idea of Arabian culture that's seen in the Disney movie Aladdin. Real Arabian culture, well, it did have harems and they did do belly dances and things like that. They did not dress or behave the way that Westerners really believe they do. But you can see from this early edition of Arabian Nights, you have got the Aladdin figure, the kind of beggar, standing here, and he's kind of a caricature of a person, kind of a cartoon. In the Orientalist paintings over here of the harem girls, you have them just kind of all laying around with their tambourine on their tiger skin, and that's it. They have some flowers and a brazier, which is like a heating thing. They are wearing clothes, a lot of clothes. That started going away until you get to Aladdin, where everybody is wearing around with their faces half veiled, but everything else showing. And that's not how it is. You can see, if you look at the Aladdin figure on the book and the Aladdin figure down here, how the outfit is sort of similar, except for these guys would never walk around with a bare chest. There is questionable exchange. That's when edited sources take parts of information and they lack the full context and content. So your information is misrepresented or it's generalized. You know, if one person looks like this, then everybody has to look like this. It can be biased, so you present things to prove your own viewpoint of what happens. It can be anachronistic. That's a 10-penny word. Anachronistic means something is out of usually time or place or cultural practice. Kind of like if you were dressed up in a medieval costume carrying a cell phone. That's anachronistic. It can be all right for art and fiction as long as it's not represented as the truth. And what the danger is, it creates a partial view of a culture and tends to be an extreme viewpoint of it. Either it's presented really negatively or it's presented really romantically, which means just taking out the dramatic, interesting parts and not giving you the whole picture. And a really good contemporary example of this is Queen Charlotte in Bridgerton, which is a Netflix series. And she was actually depicted well. You can see the actress that plays her here, and then an actual portrait of Queen Charlotte. She was of mixed heritage, so that was a truth. But in the Bridgerton series on TV, the overall society is very diverse. It looks like today. There's all sorts of people that are there and doing whatever they do in the series. It's really good fiction as long as you realize that historically it wasn't really like that. That there was more of a division in classes and activities and the people that you would associate with. So just keep that in mind when you watch things that are based on, histories, that the history is fictionalized. It's not truth. Though I absolutely love Queen Charlotte. She is incredible. And that series is really good. So censorship is the repressing of information and images because it either breaks a cultural norm or presents an idea and view that's thought of as dangerous. Some of them are and some of them are not. In cultural exchange, censored information can include parts of their history, their beliefs, their rituals. A lot of information was lost because when Europeans were exploring the world and discovering or running into other cultures that pre-existed in places, Instead of finding out about the things they did, they just wrote off all of their religions as heathenism. It's all just wrong. And the history started when the Europeans stepped their foot there. And the history before that was totally ignored. That's something to keep in mind. It can also include repression and bullying, cancel culture, and simply ignoring the fact that another culture exists. And that creates an incorrect view of the culture, even if information and things are, you don't agree with them. That doesn't mean that they're not valuable to understand something. You need all the viewpoints in order to truly understand any kind of situation. So your assignment is something, remember when we first started this, you had an exercise where you took a text that you wrote and you ran it through Google Translate in a whole bunch of different languages and then back into English. That was kind of a warm-up so you know how to use the program. This is kind of the same process you're doing now. So you're going to work with Finnegan's Wake. It's written by James Joyce, who was one of the great Irish writers. It's supposed to be the most difficult book in the English language to read, in part because there's hardly any punctuation or sentence structure. He tends to make up words and have really long run-on sentences, and it kind of loops around. However, it is like definitely my top 5 favorite books. So when you first look at it, it pretty much is nonsense, but you're going to try to translate it with Google Translate. And I'm going to demonstrate what to do. So you go to the linked text of Finnegan's Wake, and there are 2 sites that I linked in order that you could use. One is Blocked by School. Hopefully the other one is not. You're going to copy a paragraph. They're not really paragraphs for the most part, so just copy a considerable hunk of text, you know, more than a sentence or 2, if there were sentences. Paste it into Google Translate, and then you're going to translate in this order. English to Spanish, then copy the Spanish, paste it in, translate the Spanish to Irish, copy that, paste it in, go back to English, and then put it into a Google Doc under your very first part that you started to translate. And bonus, if you illustrate it, which is a challenge. So let's look at this on the classroom. Okay, let's get out of our slides. And this is the one that is blocked. So let me refresh this. The new one isn't showing up, so. This is the other site that I added in there. And there are books with episodes. He uses episodes instead of chapters. It doesn't matter which one you click. We're going to go episode 3. And very quickly you can kind of see that it looks like a lot of nonsense. So I'm just going to go grab a hunk of text. Let's kind of grab this one. Oops. Copy it. Summon Google Translate. It's English. And I'm going to go into Spanish. And then I'm going to copy the Spanish. Paste the Spanish in there. I'm going to translate it to Irish. Copy the Irish. Rid of the Spanish. Irish in there, detect language, and I'm going to copy it back to English. And it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's a little bit better. Okay? Sometimes when you do this, it will read things as abbreviations that we use, like LOL, and toss that in there as well. Okay? And then I would just copy this and put it in my Google Doc. I also included a YouTube video of the Dropkick Murphys singing Finnegan's Wake. The song is similar to the basic idea of the book, but the book is ever so much more. Still, the song is fun to bounce around to. Okay, that's it.